Wow, so Bill Gates has been buying up a lot of farmland, and it's definitely concerning, considering how much our food could potentially be controlled by this one tech billionaire. Check it out.
Yeah, so let's talk about what are we eating? What is he growing on Gates farmland?
Right. And I should clarify, he's not actually the one doing the farming. He's more like a landlord, right? So he acquired all this land, and then other companies are doing the farming on it. And a lot of this is kind of big ag, right? So in Florida, we've got carrots. In Georgia, there are Vidalia onions. Now, he's actually sold the Vidalia onion farms to another farmer in Georgia, but he did have those for some time. In Louisiana, we're looking at soybeans, rice, cotton, soybeans in Nebraska. And then what's, I think, most interesting is that in Washington state, in the southern border, right above Oregon, he has a 14,500 acre plot of land that is growing the potatoes that turns into French fries for McDonald's. So that's something we really didn't expect, especially because he's so committed to public health.
Of course, most everybody knows Bill Gates, right? He's the one who helped start Microsoft, which most of you guys are probably using on your computers right now. But what's really causing alarm is how Bill Gates has just been crossing over to become a leader in so much more than just tech. We're talking farming, vaccines, GMOs, and hey, even mosquitoes. I mean, do you really want a huge part of your everyday life in the hands of this guy? A friend of mine told me recently, if Bill is trying to help humanity, then why is he the biggest farmland owner in and out of America? And why have all of those farms stopped growing food since he purchased them? There was even a fourth generation farmer in South Georgia who wrote an open letter to Bill Gates and basically called the tech billionaire out for his farmland ownership right here in the good old US of A. He compared the situation to a child abuser controlling one child and then said that Gates doesn't want him to control a single acre. The Georgia resident didn't like the way how Bill Gates' land acquisitions were kept secretive. He noted that a May 4th, 2021 article revealed that the billionaire has purchased 200,000 acres of land in 18 states, but Georgia wasn't listed among the states. Makes you wonder, huh? So later he learned that an acquaintance of his revealed that he had sold his farmland in Georgia to Gates prior to that report. Then of course there's the whole thing about Gates' ideology of technology being a cure for all problems. Do you guys agree with that? Not to mention, Gates is heavily invested in plant-based proteins. The tech entrepreneur doesn't realize that proper animal impact is not responsible for climate change. They pointed out how Gates' attempts at influencing the agricultural systems in India and Africa ended up in this huge fiasco, really bringing home the repercussions of letting a businessman make farming decisions. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation poured $1 billion into the push for green revolution in Africa. Fast forward to now, critics say the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, funded in 2006 with money from the Gates and Rockefeller foundations, has promoted or allegedly promoted an industrial model of agriculture that poisons soils with chemicals and encourages farmers to go into debt by buying expensive seeds, fertilizers, and pesticides. Now, as a result of that debt, some farmers had no choice but to sell their land or household goods like stoves and TVs. It's a trap. Now, you might wonder why a figure from the tech industry is showing such an interest in agriculture, right? But if we zoom out, it's not just any farmland that he's investing in. He's also putting his resources into companies like Monsanto, known for producing the Roundup weed killer. This company found itself in a legal situation, being required to pay around $10 billion to settle cancer-related lawsuits arising from the use of their product. The situation is causing concern because it raises questions about whether or not Bill Gates could potentially gain too much influence over the food supply. And I gotta tell you guys, I hear people telling me all the time, the billionaires, most of whom gained so much more wealth, and since C-19 and the politicians who were pretty much seeking wealth and power may very well get together to become the ultimate worst thing to happen to humanity. What do you guys think? And that's why I'm thankful that we have our Financial Freedom Fam getting to the truth of the matter and actually giving the American people what is what. And what's what ain't what they're sharing on the mainstream media, I'll tell you that. I definitely recommend subscribing to the channel and also hit that notification bell and join the family. And hey, I totally would not mind you guys hitting that like button either. Thank you so much. But seriously, let's take a look at the sheer scale of Bill Gates' operation. They own the soil where the potatoes in McDonald's French fries grow, the carrots from the world's largest producer, and the onions that Americans saute every night for dinner. But they're far better known for their work in tech and in trying to save the climate. So Bill Gates owns more than 269,000 acres of farmland across 18 states, more than the entire acreage of New York City. The farmland was purchased through a constellation of companies that all link back to the couple's investment group, Cascade Investments, based in Kirkland, Washington. Their land holdings range anywhere from 70,000 acres in North Louisiana, where their farmland grows soybeans, corn, cotton, and rice, to 20,000 acres in Nebraska, where farmers grow soybeans. They bought and later sold an additional 6,000 acres in Georgia. In Washington, the Gateses own more than 14,000 acres of farmland, and that includes potato fields so massive that they're visible from space, and some of which are processed into French fries for McDonald's. And in Florida, farmers grow carrots on their property. The land holdings are separate from their previous investments in companies that support large-scale farming like Monsanto and the tractor manufacturer John Deere. Now, the Gates' current holdings only represent a fraction of the 283 million acres of farmland that is owned and rented out by non-farmers. Now, that could soon change. About 40% of farmland is actually owned by seniors 65 years or older, meaning more farmland is expected to come onto the market soon. And that could spell an opportunity for young farmers hoping to get their start, but they're going to be up against some stiff competition. Financial titans like Prudential and Hancock, they have divisions specifically for investors looking to make money on farmland portfolios. Not to mention, you got the likes of Bill Gates that are out there buying land. So Bill Gates, he was also an early investor in fake meat companies aiming to combat the environmental harms of raising livestock by creating more convincing plant-based alternatives. He backed Impossible Foods, and we all know how problematic their food could be. Gates also held shares of Beyond Meat through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust. Looking at the ingredients of Beyond Burger, the list includes water, pea protein, expeller pressed canola oil, refined coconut oil, rice protein, and natural flavors. Now, this natural flavors is usually code for hiding the actual ingredients, something like when you see the fragrance. Both are a blend of all sorts of chemicals concealed behind a vague term, and it's hard to unravel the exact components even after contacting the companies directly. All I know is this doesn't really align with a healthy approach. What do you guys think? I mean, it would be helpful for them to put those ingredients up against those found in a grass-fed, grass-finished piece of meat from a well-managed farm. It's just plain to see the transparency of knowing precisely what goes into meat underscores its nutritional value, unlike the ambiguous makeup of the Beyond Burger. In January, Bill Gates explained his support for genetic engineering in an interview with Wall Street Journal. He talked about a very thorough safety procedure and reduces the amount of pesticides that you need, all sorts of good stuff. But a short film by the Center of Food Safety describes how the state of Hawaii, which hosts more open fields for experimental genetically engineered crops than any other state, has become contaminated with high volumes of toxic pesticides. Pesticides often drift, so it's no wonder that children in school and entire communities end up getting sick. To make matters worse, in most cases, these companies, they're not even required to disclose what they're spraying. Now, if you think about what Bill Gates is saying here, you would expect the agricultural fields of Hawaii, the leading testing grounds for genetically engineered crops in the United States, to be bustling with low pesticide, climate resilient, vitamin enhanced crops. But instead, the large majority of GMO crops being grown on Hawaii and in the United States are herbicide tolerant crops that are driving up the use of glyphosate, the main ingredient in Monsanto's Roundup, and a chemical that the World Health Organization's cancer experts classify as probably carcinogenic to humans. These corporations have also spent hundreds of millions of dollars on public relation efforts to promote industrial scale, chemical intensive GMO agricultures as the answer to world hunger, using similar talking points that Gates said in the Wall Street Journal interview that Gates-funded groups also echo. Now, if you look at the data analysis, these groups, they provide little information about possible risk or even the downsides of GMOs, and instead amplifies the agrochemical industry's PR mantra that the science is settled on safety and necessity of GMOs. There are some critics asking how Gates is still walking around a free man. That's what people need to be asking themselves. And if you notice, there's hardly any bad press about Gates in mainstream media. But then again, Gates also does have quite a few media companies in his back pocket. This brings up yet another question. Does Gates' funding of media taint objectivity? I mean, We're talking about big names here like ABC, PBS, The Guardian. Beyond their subject matter, these companies have something else in common. They were all bankrolled by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And direct funding of media organizations is only one way that the world's most powerful foundation influences what the public reads, hears, and watches. To garner attention for the issues it cares about, the foundation has invested millions in training programs for journalists. It funds research on the most effective ways to craft media messages. Gates-backed think tank turns out media fact sheets and newspaper opinion pieces. Magazines and specific journals get Gates money to publish research and articles. Experts coached in Gates-funded programs write columns that appear in media outlets from the New York Times to the Huffington Post, while digital portals blur the line between journalism and spin. The efforts are part of what the foundation calls advocacy and policy. Now, over the last decade, Gates has devoted $1 billion to these programs, which now accounts for about a tenth of the giant philanthropy's $3 billion a year spending. The Gates Foundation spends more on policy and advocacy than most big foundations, including Rockefeller and MacArthur, spend in total. Some of the Gates Foundation's approaches are controversial, like its embrace of genetically modified crops and emphasis on technological fixes for health problems. Critics fear foundation funding of the media will muffle those debates. And with all three trustees setting the overall strategy, Bill and Melinda Gates and fellow billionaire Warren Buffett, there's something deeply anti-democratic about such a concentration of influence. They're like one giant entity that seems to be very skilled at promoting its agenda. But what do you guys think? Some journalists are actually uneasy with these arrangements. Seattle freelancer Robert Fortner, he stopped writing about Gates for Crosscut after the local online news site received general support grants that total $500,000, contingent on matching funds. Guardian Health editor Sarah Bosley, she said that she often shies away from coverage of the foundation, positive or negative, for fear of being accused of a conflict. I mean, let's face it, guys, every grant comes with at least one string attached. He said the hope that the grant will be renewed. Now, if you think about it, plain and simple, grant recipients can be reluctant to bite the hand that feeds them. Makes sense, right? Few of the news organizations that gets Gates money have produced any critical coverage of foundation programs. The Guardian is an exception, with a recent blog post that blasted the foundation's associations with agricultural giant Monsanto that's causing all sorts of problems.